Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and I'm recording for my Battlechat podcast live from the Partizan show, the Other Partizan technically, August 2018. And as well as all the sweaty wargamers that have been here today in the strange humid weather, I've been on the trail of famous author of historical fiction and academic as well, which we can talk about, Mr. Harry Sidebottom. So hello, Harry.
Hello, Henry. So you couldn't find a famous author, so you picked me.
That's right, you'll do. I couldn't find one, so you'll do. Very simply, Harry, I mean, you've been a regular fixture at this Partizan war game show for 2 or 3 years now, is that right?
Yeah, 3 years. Lawrence and Trix asked if I'd like to come along 3 years ago. I used to come along because I am a war gamer anyway.
Ah.
So now I come along and sign books as well. Let's try and play the odd game.
Right, so you write historical fiction set in ancient Rome. That's what you're best known for. And so are you an ancient Roman wargamer as well?
I'm pretty Catholic tastes in wargaming. Yes, I do. I have, oddly enough, a late Roman army and an early Imperial army and a Republican army.
Okay, we get the picture.
But I mainly actually play board games now. War board games.
Oh, that's interesting. So what kind of board games?
Command and Colours. Big fan of the series. I can play it with my sons because it's wonderful, elegant simplicity. And yes, I do plough my way through the big GMT monsters that take me 6 months to learn. But
fantastic. So you've got all the credentials, Harry. You've got all the credentials, and you've also got academic credentials. You actually teach at a university. Was it Oxford or something like that?
Yeah, it's a small university no one's heard of called Oxford. I'm the lecturer in ancient history at Lincoln College, Oxford.
Oh, wow, that's great. So how long have you been doing that for?
That's a nasty one. Since 2002.
2002. Anyone would think he's an established historian, ladies and gentlemen. So was that always something you wanted to do? Did you always want to pursue an academic career?
I did, but I wanted to be a novelist first. I mean, I quite often get asked at literary festivals, really irritating question, when did you decide to give up being a historian and become a novelist?
Oh, that's nasty.
And it implies that somehow being a novelist is not as credible as being a historian. But also, I haven't given up. I'm still a historian. and also, I was writing fiction long before I became an academic.
Oh, that's really interesting. So being a writer, an author, has been an ambition for a long time then?
Okay, when I was a lad, I had 4 life ambitions.
Yeah.
I've nailed 2 of them. I did become an Oxford Don. I have published quite a few novels, 10 actually. 10. I haven't nailed the other 2. I'm unlikely to play international rugby now. And I don't think Hollywood's going to hire me.
Oh, well, we'll see what we can do. Once those Hollywood directors hear you on this podcast, Harry, you never know what might happen. This podcast can open doors for you.
Oliver Stone's a big fan, I hear. Of yours.
Oh, bless you. Yes, well, we go back a long way. But anyway, let's have a quick look, because you've got an impressive list of novel titles here, which you can say something about the series. I've got here, starting with Warrior of Rome, King of Kings, Lion of the Sun, The Caspian Gates, Wolves of the North, The Amber Road, Iron and Rust, Blood and Steel, love these titles, Throne of the Caesars, and the latest one is The Last Hour. So tell us something, are these all part of the same series, Harry?
No, they're not. The first 6 are in the Warrior of Rome series, and they run from a novel called Far in the East to The Amber Road, and they feature a real general called Ballista.
Right.
They were billed by Penguin as the Sharp series set in ancient Rome, mainly because publishers have to always build something as being
like something else.
Or quite often like something else meets something else, usually which have nothing to do with each other or the book.
Yeah.
They're fairly conventional military action. Hopefully would very much appeal to wargamers.
Yeah.
Well, they do. I mean, wargamers tell me they like them.
Yeah.
Then I love the books, but I was a bit worried. Having done 6 in 6 years, it could become a treadmill. Yeah, and if I got bored, you'd be damn sure the readers realised this straight away. So I went away and did the Throne of the Caesars trilogy. Multiple storylines, multiple characters, The Times was kind enough to call them Game of Thrones without the dragons.
Oh, wow.
Well, actually, what they said was Game of Thrones without the sex or dragons.
So if you were hoping for that, guys, bad luck.
No. Weirdly enough, there is much more sex in those than the previous 6. But
Oh, right.
obviously not enough for the reviewer in the Times. So I did those. They're very different. They're still set in the 3rd century AD in the Roman Empire, but it's much more high-level politics. They're a more complex read, much more political, although there are set-piece battles, of course.
Yeah.
And my new one, The Last Hour, I returned to the hero Ballista, but I wanted to change again. This time it's a stripped-down thriller.
Oh,
He's
wow.
got until sunset the next day to get across Rome, prevent the assassination,
Oh, my
or
God.
everyone he loves dies.
So it's 24 in Rome.
Funnily enough, that's exactly what the Telegraph said.
Oh, really? Oh, fantastic. Oh, that sounds absolutely brilliant.
Jack Bauerus.
Oh, well. So one thing I wanted to ask you, because obviously I'm a writer myself of non-fiction at the moment, but hoping to also be a novelist. It's really interesting hearing you talk about your setting. Do you do what Bernard Cornwell's done with Sharp, which is basically the battles in your novels, they're all real battles, and your character somehow inveigles themselves into that piece of action?
Yep, in the main I do. I always think of it more like George MacDonald Fraser with the Flashman books.
Okay.
That brilliant way he got Flashy into everything, the Siege of Lucknow,
Yeah.
Custer dying at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, always Flashy's there. Some of because my period I set them in is so obscure.
Yeah.
Some of the battles we know nothing about, genuinely nothing about apart from the name.
Right.
So it gives me a free hand
Oh, fantastic.
to make... Also, it allows the battles to be different.
Yes.
In fact, when I got my first contract to write novels set in the 3rd century, my boss at Oxford, Professor Bert Smith, congratulated me on picking a period so obscure no one could ever prove me wrong about anything.
Well done, that man.
In a backhanded way. Thanks, Bert.
Now, it's interesting you should say that, because, as you say, you've set in your stuff in kind of 3rd century AD, whereas I suppose most people are more familiar with the rather earlier Roman Empire stuff, from the Roman invasion of Britain and that kind of period, fighting the Gauls and what have you. So could you give us some kind of picture of the 3rd century AD Rome?
Oh, just try and stop me,
Just
Henry.
briefly.
It's usually called the 3rd century crisis. Everything starts going wrong. Conventionally, it starts with the assassination of the Emperor Alexander Severus on the Rhine in 235 AD.
Right.
And conventionally, it ends when Diocletian comes to the throne in 284. So it's about half a century, and the Romans start losing. They start losing big time to the barbarians. They also have endless civil wars, and they also have endless revolutions and palace intrigues. I mean, it is a wonderful period. It's a period of great change. The empire that emerges in the next century is very different from the one that went into the crisis.
Right.
But how that change happened fascinates me as a novelist and a historian, because our sources are so bad. There's a huge field for exploration and theorising. I can make stuff up.
You can make
And
stuff
let's go
up.
back to it. No one can prove me wrong.
Because, of course, this is also the period where you're seeing the split of the empire into East and West. Is that right? So you've got more happening in the Eastern Empire as well, with rise of Byzantium and that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, at one point in the 260s, when most of my novels are set, the empire's actually split into 3.
Oh, right.
You've got a rebel regime that lasts from AD 260 to 270-odd.
Yeah.
In Gaul, Britain, Gaul, Spain break away.
Yeah.
And in the east, Palmyra under
of course.
Odenatus, and then the famous Queen Zenobia.
Yeah.
Whether they're independent or not is debatable. I mean, they pay lip service to Rome for a long time,
Yeah.
but in fact go their own way. And in the middle, you've got the beleaguered Emperor Gallienus just holding the rump, Africa, Italy, and the Balkans.
Wow.
And being attacked on both sides, and by hard to say.
I'll say by barbarians.
Yes, thank you.
Bar black sheep.
Bar black sheep.
Now, that's really interesting, because you, in amongst there, this is an aside for my kind of completely non-wargaming but authory and designer friends. I have a friend called Jane Dixon Smith who wrote a book called The Rise of Zenobia, a short novel called The Rise of Zenobia. Look a surprise on your face. I'll have to get you a copy.
Yeah, do.
Jane will be delighted to hear Zenobia mentioned in the middle of all that, because she's a fascinating character. So that's really good. I mean, my other question really is also from the point of view as a writer who's always interested in how you split your time between your academic work and your work as a novelist.
Essentially, I work very hard, very driven, which is odd because I was very lazy when I was a young man. I'm really more of a full-time writer now.
Right.
I used to have a teaching fellowship as well at Oxford, which I had to give up.
Right.
Because I thought both the novels and the teaching might start suffering because there just wasn't enough hours in the day to do both at the standard I wanted to do them. This sounds like a cricketer explaining why he's giving up Test cricket, doesn't it? So I'm only playing the one-day game now. But I'm very reluctant to ever give up being academic altogether, or trying to be a scholar, because I get a great deal out of it, and I owe a lot to Lincoln College in Oxford.
Sure.
And I actually, weirdly enough, like teaching people.
Yeah, I can understand
And
that.
as I'm part of the admissions team, if there's something wrong with the guys in front of me, it's really my fault,
Oh,
isn't it?
right. Yeah, absolutely. So do you actually work to a set daily routine or timetable?
Yep. 6 days a week. Get up at 6:30. It sounds now I'm moving into a sort of Cormac McCarthy novel. I feed the animals. I don't start work till 10, but then I work till 6 days a week. When the deadline for the novel is getting close, then
You're pushing.
I'm pushing it, and then you go back after having some tea and you do some more work. And but I mean, I'm still quite amazed that I am a professional novelist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lifetime dream.
Pinch yourself.
And every now and then you do pinch yourself and think, is this really me?
Yeah, I
All
mean,
these
not just a novelist, but also it has to be said a best-selling novelist. I mean, you've done pretty well.
Been very lucky. We're 8 of the 10 have gone top 10 in this country, and we're translated into 17 foreign languages.
That's amazing.
We're massive in Brazil, you know.
Are you really?
Oddly enough,
Portuguese translation.
Portuguese Brazilian. We're in Portuguese Portugal as well, but.
Wow.
And as for Serbia, they fire AK-47s high in the sky when we publish a new book.
When the new one comes out.
And they pay us about £100 a book. It's amazing.
Oh, fantastic. Who actually is your publisher, Harry?
The first 6 published by Penguin, my Throne of the Caesars trilogy by HarperCollins, and I've just moved to Bonnier Zafra, who are a new publishing house in London. They're a very established continental publisher who just opened a London house.
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely delighted with them, in case anyone's listening from there. They're the best publishers in the world.
No, that's fantastic. And also, it's encouraging to actually meet and talk to someone who's done well nowadays via traditional publishing. Because, of course, there's a lot of people who've been traditionally published in the past and are now looking at self-publishing, even their back catalogue, because of the, shall we say, lack of support that they've had from their traditional publishing house in the past.
Oh, that's very true. I mean, I got my publishing deal for fiction in 2006 by pure chance. It was a boom time for historical fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, it seemed anyone could turn up at a major house and go, "I'd like to write a Roman novel," and they gave you $50,000.
Yeah.
Now it is much tougher, and I also know several mates who were published by the big houses who now are going down the self-published or have given up route.
Yeah.
Luckily, we were fairly established. I've become the royal we there, haven't I? That's me and my agent. I was fairly established, so that hasn't happened. But it is a tough time, and I feel very, very sorry for guys who are trying to break into mass market fiction now.
Yeah.
Big publishers are very risk averse.
Yeah.
They always seem to me, apart from my own publisher, obviously, who are great, to be trying to publish last year's big hit. And if you came up with something very original, you'd probably get shown the door really quickly.
Yeah, they're, as you said, much more risk averse. And I've also noticed that, even in my own tiny way for my non-fiction stuff, the advances being offered now have been halved in the last few years. So they've gone from what wasn't very much in the first place to what?
Yes.
Now, which is why, I'm considering doing my own self-publishing in the future. But it's not for the faint of heart. Anyone who is considering going down that route, find people who know what they're doing. I mean, I'm a member and fairly active in the Alliance of Independent Authors, who are, if you like, they're like a kite mark for self-publishers, because there's a lot of people who've over the years, unfortunately given self-publishing a bad name by just pumping out crap, frankly, unedited crap. So, but it's good to see that you've been well supported by your publishers for the time being, so far, perhaps you should say.
Does kind of beg the question why I left two of them.
There is that. So you have an agent as well who represents.
Yes, I mean, that's the key thing. If anyone's thinking of going down the traditional publishing route, you've got to get an agent. Yeah. Quite frankly, the big houses won't look at a manuscript, or they'll pretend to. I think convincing a reputable agent, literary agent, that your ideas are worth pursuing is more than half the battle.
Yeah.
You get a good agent, then you are likely to get some form of deal. But as Henry, as you just said, I mean, advances have been slashed, even for the big sellers. I mean, there was a time when we were being paid quite crazy money. I loved it.
But yes, I mean, people like Stephen King famously are talking a lot. He's very vocal online, and he's been talking about, his own publishers basically not giving him the kind of service that they used to give him. But at the moment, historical fiction seems to still be in kind of a boom phase. It's ubiquitous, to use a Latin word there. It's everywhere, and certainly, Roman fiction. If I go on Amazon and look at historical fiction, wow, there's lots of Roman stuff happening.
Yeah, I try and take the attitude of a guy who owns a restaurant, that if another restaurant opens near you, this is a good thing. Yeah. Certain authors of Roman fiction take diametrically the opposite attitude and think they should be able to copyright the whole of Roman history. I think it's oddly enough, it seems to receive wisdom amongst traditional publishers that historical fiction in the UK only sells if it's set in Rome, the Wars of the Roses, and maybe the Tudors, or World War II. Yeah. I think if you're trying to explore, which I have in the past, pitched ideas outside those periods, it's just a shake of the head and no. I once thought I convinced, it was HarperCollins, to let me do something else, and I'd convinced all the creatives in the meeting, so sort of the head of fiction, publicity, marketing, and then the head of sales went, but he's got no track record in this. It might not sell. And suddenly, a sea change. No one liked the idea anymore. Give us some more Roman stuff, which I'm happy to do. I would like to do... At some point, I would like to write novels that weren't set in Rome.
Oh, right.
But for the minute, I'm very, very happy to write...
Give us a hint of...
Well, I've just sketched out one that happens at the end of World War II.
Oh.
Still, you notice, sticky in the selling brand.
Yeah.
I would like to try a modern novel, contemporary novel.
Oh, that's interesting.
I come from my dad was a racehorse trainer in Newmarket.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up in stables, and the only thing I know, really, that isn't Oxford or history is racing.
Oh, I see.
So I would love to have a crack at being a rather harder, darker...
Oh, interesting.
Dick Francis type
I
figure.
See. Horsey stuff. Fantastic.
I like doing horse scenes anyway.
Yeah. Oh, right.
So I'd like to have a crack at those at some day. Oh, and finish my huge scholarly work, Fields of Mars, a cultural history of the Greek and Roman worlds through the eyes of the warrior.
Wow, hello. Okay, put me down for a copy, or put me down for a mortgage to buy a copy, probably. Because you were recently, there was a thing that came out that you were part of. Had you written it all or edited? I can't remember.
You're thinking of the wonderful bestseller, the Encyclopedia of Ancient Battles.
That's the one.
3 volumes, all in hardback. Yeah. Can't buy them separately. Yeah. I edited it with a friend, and we had about 30 scholars writing it. I'll never do it again. I mean, the cliche is right. I mean, trying to get scholars to do anything in a collaborative process is herding cats. Yeah. They're late producing it. They write something you haven't asked them to write, and they get terribly huffy when you point out it's the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But yes, it's 350 quid.
Wow! You heard that here first, ladies and gentlemen. It's a bargain as well. Amazon will probably be flogging it half price before long. One thing I wanted to ask you about the kind of surge in Roman stuff. Obviously, in the last decade or so, there's been a lot coming through Hollywood. I mean, starting with Gladiator, of course, which, is one of my all-time favourite movies.
Yeah, I love it too.
And there've been a number of others, The Eagle and some other, I can't remember the names of now, off the top of my head. But do you think that surge in interest in the film world has helped the historical novel world as well?
Yes, totally. And it also actually helped the academic world. I was teaching at Warwick University when Gladiator came out, and applications to do ancient history went up by 25% the year after the film came out. And I think it did. And I think publishers followed Hollywood and thought, wow, it's hot and trendy again.
Yeah, and if you've got Russell Crowe leading the charge for you, follow where he's going. So, lastly, Harry, I suppose I ought to ask you, so the thing that will be published next...
Thank you very much for asking, Henry.
Will be what?
It'll be a novel coming out in February or March next year, 2019. It's called The 10, as in the number, because they're 10 men. It's a standalone novel set in the Roman Empire. Well, actually not set in the Roman Empire. It's behind-the-lines rescue mission into Sassanid Persia.
Oh, wow!
And it all comes from a passage in the ancient historian Procopius. Years ago, I read about the Castle of Silence, or the Castle of Forgetting. And it's a castle somewhere in Persia. High-level political prisoners were sent by the King of Kings there, and if you ever mentioned their name again, it was a capital crime.
Oh my God!
And I read it and thought, one day I'll write a
There's
novel.
A book in
There's
that.
a book in that.
Oh,
and now there is.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Harry. That's brilliant. Looking forward to seeing that. And so that's going to be coming out next year.
Next year, 2019.
2019. Same as my book. We'll have a joint launch party.
We'll have a joint launch party. We'll have a lot of drinks.
Thank you so much, Harry.
Thank you, Henry.
Thanks for talking to us.
That's brilliant. Thanks.
Cheers. This podcast featured Dr. Harry Sidebottom, historian and author, and was recorded outside on an iPhone 7 Plus using voice recording.